I'm going to be speaking to my first guest about the ongoing debt ceiling fight, which is why he was originally booked to come on the show. But news dictates that I begin with Congressman Connie Mack on the extraordinary events today involving his Democratic colleague in the House of Representatives. Congressman Mack, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch. Nice to get a
great to be with you, Judge.
Thank you very much. Congressman Wiener today admitted to behavior which is obviously inappropriate for a member of Congress. Is this enough to get him expelled from the Congress via the ethics prosecutions that take place when someone does this?
You know, I think everybody's going to sit and judge Congressman Weiner, but really this is a matter that's going to be left between him, his family, and his constituents. Unfortunately, he should have come clean a long time ago, and now we're having to talk about what he's been doing in his past, in separate life, instead of talking about the real issues facing America.
Without getting into the weeds, one of my colleagues, James Rosen, whom you may know, covers the State Department for Fox News, points out that it is against the rules of the Congress to use congressional facilities to perpetrate a fraud. And he did hold a series of interviews in his office with Fox's Bret Baier, in which he denied doing any of this. One could argue that that was the use of federal government facilities to perpetrate a fraud, and that would be a basis for at least an ethical inquiry. Question: how would an ethical inquiry start? Who would file it? Would it have to come from the Democrats? Could it come from the Republicans? Does it come from leadership? Could any member of the House get this ball rolling?
You know, I believe any member could, but it will take the weight of the of leadership to make it happen. And frankly, I think there should be an investigation. I mean, look, the American people are looking for straight answers, for straight talk, for honesty about their futures, and this just goes, you know, this just points to one of those facets of the Congress that people don't like, and we ought to clean house.
I would imagine that if the Democratic leadership turns its back on Congressman Weiner, then he'll resign. He's not going to fight this without his own leadership behind him, is he?
Well, you'd have to ask him that. That's why I say I go back to this is really going to come down between him, his family, and his constituents.
Is there, switching gears now, Congressman Mack, is there any chance that the House of Representatives can stop the Secretary of the Treasury from going out and borrowing $2.4 trillion in the next year? Stated differently, is there any chance that the increase in the debt ceiling will be defeated by Republicans acting like they once acted when they once were in favor of sound money?
You know, I think there's a very good chance. Congress, I've got here a letter that 103 members of Congress signed that said, look, we're not in favor of raising the debt ceiling. We want to balance the budget. We want to see both statutory and a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Then we can talk about how we get the rest of our fiscal house in order. But there should be no increase in the debt ceiling without first making sure that we balance our budget.
President Obama has borrowed $2 trillion in 2 years in office. President Bush borrowed $2 trillion in 8 years in office. Now President Obama wants to borrow another $2.4 trillion. You have a very unique, it sounds painless, and I'm not sure how it would work, proposal to save money. You would allow some borrowing, but you would eventually stop it, and you would eventually actually pay down the debt, as I understand it. How does this work?
So it's pretty simple, Judge, and that's what I love about this bill that I've introduced. What we do is we cut 1%, so we take 1 penny out of every federal dollar every year for 6 years. In the 7th year, we cap spending to 18% of GDP. In the 8th year, we balance the budget, and after 10 years, we cut $7.5 trillion. So think of it this way. Out of every federal dollar, we're just taking 1 penny. 1 penny. What American that's watching this show right now hasn't had to give up 1 penny in their home budget?
When you say, Congressman Mack, we're taking 1 penny, you mean we're spending a penny less, or we're taking the penny and putting it in a bank account, and that's going to add up to $7 trillion?
We are physically cutting 1%.
All right, so you're talking about 1% across the board. You're talking about the Justice Department, the Defense Department, the Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Social Security, Medicare, everything.
Here's the beauty of this plan. So first we give the Congress and the President the opportunity to make the 1% cut together.
Right.
If the Congress and the President fail to act, fail to make the 1% cut, then it is an across-the-board cut. So it's a big incentive for the Congress and the President to work together to make that 1% cut.
All right. You probably will find a lot of support for this, if I may say so, amongst Republicans in the House, but they don't control the Senate, and obviously the President is a Democrat. So where does it go when it leaves the House?
Well, here's the thing. 103 members of Congress have signed a letter that said if we are going to have a vote on raising the debt ceiling, that won't come until after we do three things. One of the three things is my bill, and that must go through the House and the Senate before we move on the debt ceiling.
Is leadership, is Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader Cantor behind that?
This is a letter that we sent to Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor.
All right, switching.
So 103 members.
Switching gears. You are what I would call, and this phrase coming from me is the highest of compliments, a Barry Goldwater Republican. You voted against the Patriot Act because you think it interferes with liberties protected by the Constitution. You voted in favor of Congressman Dennis Kucinich's resolution in Libya because you think the troops should come home. The president shouldn't have sent them there without a declaration of war by the Congress. How does it feel to be at odds with Republican leadership?
Well, it's nothing new in my case, whether it was in the state legislature or now. But here's the great thing. Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor, they realize that there are some of us that have different opinions and see things differently. I will have to tell you, they haven't come beating me over the shoulder and trying to force my hand. They know that I believe in a limited government. They know that I believe in the Constitution. And they know that I'm doing what I think is right.
We only have about 30 seconds left. Is there a divide in the Republican Party between big government Republicans and constitutionalist Republicans like you and Ron Paul?
There are obviously always discussions. Not everyone fits in the same mold, so certainly there are some Republicans who believe different than I, and they would be on another show right now saying that Connie believes different than they do. So, but that's what's beautiful about this process. We can come to the game with different opinions and make a voice for ourselves.
Congressman Connie Mack from the great state of Florida, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Judge.